Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of the Scrimshaw Show. My name's Evan Scrimshaw. I have one of the returning champions of the show, Too Close to Call, proprietor, general Twitter asshole, former BC Conservative candidate in Vancouver Langara, Bryan Breguet. Thanks for coming on, buddy.
Hey, hi. I'm very glad to be back. I'm always wondering how many years I'm going to have people introducing me as former BC Conservative candidate. I feel it's always like just a reminder that I ran and lost, but I still deserve it. So let's go for it.
The thing is that it does lend a certain amount of credence because one of the your local scene actually I want to talk about when we do some NDP talk later in this podcast. But it is actually valuable experience. You have knocked on a lot of the same doors that are going to be pivotal in getting one of Canada's worst poll denialist and least statistically numerate MPs is on the fight in Don Davies. So Palace just dropped this morning a 4-point Liberal lead. Liaison's daily tracker has the lead up to 4 nationally, 5-point lead for the Liberals in Ontario, 8-point lead for the Liberals in Quebec, 32-point lead for the Liberals in Atlantic Canada, and a 2-point Liberal lead in BC. Palace has the Liberals up 8 in Ontario, 10 in Quebec, only 18 in Atlantic Canada. And I'm pretty sure Palace has a Liberal lead in BC, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, small lead, but yeah, that's a lead.
Yeah. I think we should just start here. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. I mean, I keep repeating, maybe it's just a coping mechanism, but I keep repeating that the one thing I really, really wanted was just for Trudeau to be gone. My derangement syndrome was with Trudeau. And so now that he's gone, honestly, I'm a lot less emotionally invested in this election. I have fully accepted that Carney might just win this election with a majority. And it doesn't make me as upset as I would be like 4 years ago, where really I was getting quite upset whenever I would see that Trudeau could win a majority, for instance. I really could not understand how this could happen. Carney and the recent polls, I think, it's upsetting me, because I think it's crazy that the government can mess up so much in the last 9 years, and all they have to do is a small rebranding and people are forgiving them, but it is what it is.
I'm going to slightly upbraid you on the small rebranding. They have pretty radically shifted the tone and tenor of this government. Look, it's going to be much of the same ministers are going to be in there, although Stephen Guilbeault is not in environment anymore, thank God. But ditching the carbon tax, ditching the cap gains tax cut or tax rise, and leading with a income tax cut, that is different than Trudeau, pretty significantly.
Yeah, and you have smaller things that are mostly aesthetic, right? I'm thinking of you have a smaller cabinet, you don't have a gender balance cabinet, something that was kind of imposed, and you couldn't think of not having it in the past. So they have definitely, the rebranding is more massive than just a small one, like I said before. But at the end of the day, it's still the same team, right? It's mostly the same cabinet minister. It's the same people that were behind Trudeau that are behind the scene for Carney. And so at the end of the day, it's a brand new coat of paint on an old car. And so I still think it's pretty crazy that people can be swayed so easily to go back with a team that they hated just 2 months ago.
Yeah, I also think this is proof that a lot of the hatred for the government was truly just hatred of Justin Trudeau. And I mean, there's plenty of reasons to hate Justin Trudeau. There's plenty of reasons to find his progressive values sort of, preening and self-indulgent. And yeah, things like the gender neutral cabinet, it never made sense. It never made sense to say it. Just have a gender neutral cabinet if that's what you want to do. Don't announce it as a cause of your virtue, because then all you do is make the female MPs or the female ministers, especially in some of the, for lack of a better way of putting it, smaller jobs, your things like democratic renewal, international development, people who are not leading big departments. It makes people inevitably think that you just put them there because you needed 50-50. I remember complaining about this the day he fucking said the thing. I was at Rideau Hall when he fucking said it. And like, I was on the grass outside Rideau Hall when he fucking said it. And I remember fighting about it at lunch, being like, this is a stupid fucking quote because all he's done is made his life harder. But, hey, that's Justin Trudeau, right? Love a good quote. Don't love thinking about how it's going to play afterwards. Yeah, if you can't tell, I still fucking hate Trudeau. I'm still done with this bullshit. He did a good job in the 2-month lame duck. I'm still fucking really pissed at him.
Yeah, no, and I think I mentioned it last time I was here with you. When I was a candidate, I mean, we could feel, and that was in Vancouver, right? And we could feel the anger against Trudeau. It was really, really so strong. And so, yeah, no, as you said, most likely a lot of the polling numbers were really just people who hated Trudeau. And as soon as you remove Trudeau, then that's good enough. It's literally the same as people were not super happy with the government last fall in BC, but, once I talked to them, I was the BC Conservative, the provincial one, and I wanted to get rid of David Eby. There was no intensity. It was like, oh yeah, Eby, he has done some good stuff, some bad stuff. It wasn't we just need to get him out like it was for Trudeau. So it's the same happening at the federal level, maybe even better, because the new guy is literally really new and he's quite liked. He has the average person has no reason to hate Carney yet. So when the average voter had some reason to not like David Eby last fall, so that might even be better than what I witnessed, or worse for the Conservative.
So that is a worthwhile thought. So I've got sort of like 3 main points, and then we're going to get into some sort of more technical stuff towards the end about modeling and polling, because you're one of the few people that I can actually have these conversations with and sort of let my inner wonk fly. The NDP are completely collapsing.
Yep.
The Conservatives don't seem to have a campaign message, and something is happening in Quebec. Where do you want to start of those 3 topics?
Let's go with the NDP. That's the most fun one for me.
So I have the NDP at 7 seats right now. A brief list of the NDP MPs who are projected by my model to lose their jobs include Peter Julian, Jagmeet Singh, obviously, Leah Gazan, the Badnock. No, that's the fuck's his name? The one in Skeena he was definitely just going to run for Nathan Cullen's old seat, provincially in 2028. Don Davies in Vancouver Kingsway. Is it still Murray Rankin in Victoria? Like, they're getting wiped, is my point. It's a fucking tire fire for the NDP. Like, one, is it going to be this bad for them when they eventually lose? Like, are we really talking about single-digit seats? Do you think they're going to recover at all? And 2, even if, Matt Green's probably going to win in Hamilton, right? Heather McPherson's definitely still going to win in Edmonton, Strathcona. Is the NDP after this election even a party that any of these survivors should want to bother leading?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, for me, I'm still shocked that when I'm making projections that I'm having sometimes literally 0 seats in BC. And I live in Kingsway. I honestly never thought that Don Davis would not be absolutely safe, because, there were some, rumors that 2019, the Liberals really tried hard in 2019 to win my seat. And even there, they went nowhere. They didn't come that close. So the fact that the NDP could be losing Kingsway, could be losing Vancouver East, right, which as a symbol, it's pretty strong, really. The fact that that's one of the 2 seats that the BC NDP kept in 2001. So no, I think the collapse is real. I don't see any reason why they would come back up. There is maybe, again, as a conservative, my coping mechanism will be to say that Carney moving to the center and announcing a lot of policies that Poilievre would support or has mentioned in the past, at some point it should upset the actual left-wing progressive voters. But at the same time, I've been saying for years now that there is one thing that is truly impressive with the progressives in Canada, and is that they've been united for a while. I mean, they united in Manitoba, they united in Alberta, they united in BC. So it seems that the internal divisions of the left, where you used to have those, let's face it, like actual communist voters who would call any centrist or they're the same as the conservative, we don't see those anymore. They're very, very small. And so that's really what the NDP has. And so I think this looks bad, because there might be those voters who don't love the tax cuts, don't love the new policies of Carney, but at the same time, the dynamic has changed so much that for them, they probably think, oh, actually, we can win this thing, or we can prevent Poilievre from winning. So we're going to, pinch our nose and just go for it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is the NDP, like you and I have been saying this for 3 years now, right? The decision to sign the confidence and supply agreement, and subsequently the decision to trash the Liberals at every step of the process and then continue to vote with them, has left the NDP sort of a party without a home, right? Because left-leaning Liberals like me hate the NDP. I think they're fraudulent. I think they're talking out their ass. I think they have no principles, no anything. Because if you hate the Liberals so much, if you hate the Liberals nearly a tenth of what you claim to hate them, you would never support them for as long as you did, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't hate the government, if you don't think the Liberals are all actually, Tories in disguise, right? Corporatist, CEO bootlickers or whatever, then saying so for years and years and years when you don't believe it is also worse, right? And so, nobody on the sort of like left sort of liberal flank of the party is happy, but your Skenas, your North Island Powell Rivers, your Kootenays, nobody on that wing of the nobody on your conservative NDP flank are happy, because all you did by signing a deal and then voting with the Liberals for 3 years, all you've told them is, oh, so you're just like you're just liberals in an orange kind of paint. And like, part of the problem for the NDP, because obviously in Ontario they had a great performance for their vote share, by holding all of these incumbents against Doug Ford. Well, one, most of the NDP MPs in like against the Conservatives, right, who have the Conservatives in the main opposition, Skeena, North Island Powell River, Courtney Alberni, even something like Nanaimo Ladysmith. Well, one, the Conservatives are winning those by 10, 15, 20 points. So no amount of tactical voting is overcoming a 20-point lead, first off. And second of all, why does the NDP get to, in like some of those, the NDP are not even in second in my projections, and I assume in your projections. And three, and I need to stress this completely, tactical voting or strategic voting is not going to save Don Davies in Vancouver Kingsway. It's not going to save Laurel Collins in Victoria. It's not very Rankin. Rankin, of course, is or was a cabinet minister in provincially. In Victoria, like, you're not going to get saved by tactical voting when the choice, Leah Gazan in Winnipeg Center. Tactical voting is not going to save her in a Lib NDP contest. That's not how Lib NDP contests work. And the Conservatives are too far ahead in your Kootenays and your Skeenas and your Courtney Albernis, to be saved by tactical voting, which then leads to so is it really just going to be a rump of 9 people? I mean, like, do you think they get official party status?
If I had to bet money today, I think I would bet on no. But at the same time, I don't expect them to overperform like the Ontario NDP did, where they really overperformed from almost everywhere they had incumbency. But I'm guessing they will overperform my model in enough seats to maybe climb to 12. I also think if we need any good news for the NDP, I think there might be some gains to be made in Montreal. I mean, that might be the one region, the one city where they could, I'm thinking of the Quebec Solidaire seats, where you do have in Montreal, you do actually have very, very left-wing, like borderline Marxist voters. And we've seen it repeatedly provincially. So if they could get them, and I think Singh was in Montreal yesterday, and, the symbolic, his safest seat is now Rosemont in Montreal. So more than Vancouver East or Kingsway. So that might be really the silver lining. You make 2 gains in Montreal, you save Vancouver East and 1 or 2 others, and you just crawl your way to 12 or 13, and you keep official party status. But it's gonna be an uphill battle.
Yeah, the other problem for the NDP and sort of a lot of its conservative heartland, they don't have an incumbent in Northern Ontario. They don't have an incumbent in Kootenay. Like it really seems like the places where they've lost that incumbency are places where they know the Conservatives are going to win next time.
Yes.
I mean, I'm quite happy to see the back of Charlie Angus just because this is a man who tried to make a vote in Timmins worth significantly more than a vote in Brampton solely because it would make his political life easier. So he can resoundingly go fuck himself. Don Davies losing. You're in Kingsway, right? This has sort of been a liberal fever dream for a while.
Yeah.
Kingsway was what was his name? Michael Emerson, I believe.
Yeah. Yes.
Who elected as a liberal across the floor in 2006 to the Conservatives, ran as a Conservative. I want to say came third, but that was when the NDP picked it up, and they've had it since. This has sort of long been a fever dream of the Liberals is to knock out Davies. Obviously, this is a man who has a long history of poll denialism.
Yeah.
Once asking PJ Fournier why the NDP were down in seats when they were up in vote share, and calling Angus Reid a liberal-funded pollster. Do we think Kingsway is really happening? You obviously you live in the seat. The math says it's like an 8-point liberal lead, which is really just a function of how much of a lib NDP swing is happening in BC right now. That feels aggressive to me. But are you sensing sort of Carney mania on the ground, or do you think this is a seat where the models are going to be out of whack with progressive opinion?
I could see the models being wrong. So far, the only metric I have is really signs. And obviously, given the grand game of Dan Davies, and he has like years and years and years of data, while, my riding is already full of orange signs everywhere, right? I mean, every main street has those big signs already installed. So, but that's to be expected, right? They're very organized for this. And we're going to see. I mean, I'm really looking forward to see if I see more liberal signs than I did in 2019, because again, 2019, the Liberals had Tamara Haggart, right? Like the CTV news anchor, like that was a pretty big catch. And we would see more liberal sign than usual, and she still didn't come that close to winning. So if they're about to win it this time, I would expect to see some signs on the ground, like either more door knockers or more signs or something like this. We will see. I could see Don Davies just he has done so much work with, ethnic and cultural minorities over the years that he might just have this vote locked up with for himself, and it doesn't matter what the Liberals do. But that's the type of things, our models would never pick up on.
Yeah, there's a reason why some of the seats that basically every model has been really bad at tend to be ethnic minority seats, because they can move they can move differently to what the sort of national trend says. Actually, let's just do this now. Obviously, BC Conservatives had a very good night in Surrey in 2024. Poilievre has sort of reoriented his party, sort of tried to harness that 2011 sort of energy with immigrant voters, crime message and anti-drugs message that tends to play very well. Do we think the national polling or the BC and Ontario polling, I guess, is so bad for the Conservatives that they are going to still be locked out of gains in Surrey, gains in Brampton, gains in Mississauga? Or do you think that the sort of realignment that we saw in 2024 that we're going to see again in 2025, that we're definitely going to see in a relative sense in 2025, do you think the Conservatives are, can still pick up a Brampton, a Mississauga, gain a Surrey or a Richmond seat? Or do you think the sort of the tide for Carney is so strong that, Poilievre will do relatively better in those areas, but won't be able to win?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was going to say. I think right now I would expect a realignment, but it's not going to be enough to overcome the wave, or maybe one gain or surprising gain here or there, but not enough to, really make the map blue like we did with the BC Conservative, where we won like a lot of the seats we were supposed to win. We won some seats that were, really too close to call, and then we won seats that we were never supposed to win, right? Like with 30 points swing. So I think, and to go back to 2011, I think the main difference in how the Conservatives are trying to really get into this community is it seems more genuine this time, as in it's not just, Jason Kenney, saying, being the current minister or something like this and trying to just, go and reach out to them. It's really more organic, right? I mean, what I've seen in BC is a lot of organization was really some South Asian people who were not in politics before, and they organize and join us. And I see mostly the same people, the same movement going to Poilievre. So I would expect a pretty significant realignment. Might not be enough to win the seats, but if it starts getting closer, and then if my model starts showing the Liberals are by like 5 or 10 seats, but I see that Surrey, Brampton, the Liberals are only up by like 5 points, then I would start thinking, at least subjectively, that I wouldn't be surprised if the Conservative would win the most seats because of surprises in those areas. But it does require the Conservative to at least get a little bit of this wave cancelled for Carney. They cannot lose Ontario by 8 points. They cannot straight up lose BC by a few points. They need to at least be tied or small lead in the popular vote. Because if you go back to the BC Conservative, we were pretty tight in the popular vote, right? It was just we knew we were doing well. It's just that we did exceptionally well in Surrey. So it's a slightly different situation from Poilievre, who right now is doing pretty badly in the polls, but it will require a monumental shift in those areas.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, but you have been the one sort of beating the drum on this. Okay, let me frame the sort of question about the Conservatives this way. Are the Conservatives running a bad campaign, or is Carney running a good campaign? Like, does Carney need to stumble for the Conservatives to get back in this, or is it that the Conservatives are running such a bad campaign that if they just start running a good one again, or pre-campaign period, whatever, do we think it's that the Conservatives, the reason that the Carney's lead has sort of been able to get to this point, do we think it's a more sort of Conservative failure or Mark Carney being good at this?
It has to be a mix of both, right? I'm going to be boring here, but it has to be a mix of both. I mean, I think Carney has been quite impressive ever since he ran for the leadership. He does make mistakes here and there. He gets tripped up on some questions, but that's to be expected, and we never expect anybody to be perfect. But they've been doing, he and his team have been doing pretty well. They've made the right choice in most places. After this, obviously, you and I will have a disagreement. I think, for instance, you really like the Mike Myers video. I'm not the biggest fan, but at the same time, I realize that I'm not the target demographic for it. I'm relatively optimistic for the campaign of the Conservative, because I think some of the problems they've had in the last 6 weeks was they couldn't make up their mind. And I know for a fact I have contacts, like friends, who were telling me that especially the office was pretty split, even on literally the next rally, should it be a bring it home or Canada first? And I think by now they cannot really do this flip-flop, and so they've decided to go all in on one type of messaging. And so I think that will help them to at least be consistent and not talk about the carbon tax every other day. With that being said, the reason I've been pessimistic overall for the election is I think it doesn't matter that much. I think even if Poilievre does an objectively better campaign, the vibes have been so strongly for Carney that, and you know, we have so much like evidence of like boomers or older voters being so in love with Carney, being motivated really by Trump and voting against Poilievre, that it doesn't really matter. Poilievre cannot just rely on having a good campaign. He needs an exceptional campaign, and he probably needs Carney to make a few mistakes here and there if he wants to have a chance.
Yeah, I don't know why. I mean, I do know why, because I know how our press works. But like, the thing that's been funny is that a lot of pundits have been basically trying to make Carney's collapse happen. Right? I remember the CBC coverage of the English language debate. I didn't watch the French debate, and I did not watch the coverage of the French debate. But I remember the English language debate, and, you know, the CBC panel's like, oh, Carney had a bad night. Oh, he didn't come off well. Oh, he wasn't combative enough. He wasn't this. He wasn't that. And it's just like, watching that and then watching the result where he gets 85% of the vote and watching them talk up Karina fucking Gould, who ended up getting 3.2%. Like, it felt ludicrous, and it feels like a lot of people are trying to grade Carney on a curve that Canadians are not grading him on right now. And whether that's fair or not, like, that's beside the point, because that's not how elections work. But Canadians do not seem to care that he's boring, right? Canadians do not seem to care that he is not the world's most polished public speaker. They are not judging him by the sort of flash. They're judging him by on one very specific point. They think he is best equipped to handle the thing they really care about. And in the same way as Stephen Harper in 2008 and 2011, they didn't care that Harper was a nerd. They didn't care that Harper was, you know, the least charismatic, probably the least charismatic prime minister Canada had, certainly in modern times. Like, they didn't care, because the one thing they cared about was handling an economic crisis. And Stephen Harper was a hell of a lot better than Stéphane Dion, Michael Ignatieff, or Jack Layton to do it. So they did not care about the other stuff. It feels like Canadians, if this election is about who is best to handle Trump, I don't see how Carney loses.
Yes.
And the problem is that I can look at this and go, you know, well, you know, the historical comps sort of suggest that this is a bit of a sugar high. But, you know, well, I guess this will just be where I do this. He's not Kamala Harris. I need everybody who keeps invoking Kamala Harris to understand that Kamala Harris had their two sort of differences, right? One, Kamala Harris actually did a very good job, right?
Yes.
If you had given any Democrat, I went back and listened to a podcast appearance I did the week before Biden resigned, when it sort of looked like right after Trump had gotten shot, and before the momentum on replacing Biden sort of picked up again and then crescendoed with him leaving that weekend. If you would have told that guy, the guy who did that version of Evan Scrimshaw, who did that podcast, oh yeah, she's only going to lose by 1.5 points. Democrats are going to win 214 House seats, 215, whatever they ended up with, and 215, and they're only going to lose, like, you know, one of the Senate seats that are in play. They were always going to lose the other three that they lost. Oh, I would have jumped for joy recording that podcast. Like, I would have jumped for fucking joy. So one, Kamala Harris better candidate, but two, one of her main fuck ups was not distancing herself from Joe Biden, in part because Joe Biden wouldn't fucking let her Carney came in, scrapped the carbon tax, scrapped the capital gains tax rise. Like, those are two extremely significant and symbolic decisions to break from Trudeau. And I just don't see how you can look at Carney, you can look at somebody who has pivoted substantively and in terms of and rhetorically from Trudeau and go, he's just another Trudeau. He's not. He might be wrong for Canada. You can make that argument if you want to, but he's not just Trudeau 2.0. And it's really, really funny to me that conservatives really just thought, just another Trudeau. And then Carney comes in and, right away, first thing, the showboaty signing the order, to cancel the carbon tax. Like, that was a brilliant move.
Yes.
And it seems like the conservatives haven't, one of Poilievre's best strengths is the ability to make the political weather, right? What he wanted to be talking about was what we were talking about. And he hasn't been able to do that with Carney. And if he can't change that, and I don't know how he can change it, honestly, given the guy down south, but if he can't change that, I don't know what he does.
Yeah, I mean, it would have to try to really focus on cost of living and change, right? That's really the two themes that go in his favor. But you're absolutely right. Yesterday I was rewatching a YouTube video where it was like a montage of the TV show Veep and then Kamala Harris and how, because Harris, sometimes she was pretty good. Like at the debate, for instance, I thought she did pretty well, but then she would have other moments where she was terrible. And I haven't seen this from Carney. I have seen bad interviews or worse, less good interviews from Carney or answers from him, but I've never seen him really being really, really bad out there. And I think this is what is annoying the conservative. They're really, they're back to suffering from some sort of derangement syndrome. And it reminds me a little bit of 2019, 2021 derangement syndrome against Trudeau, where you hate him so much that, you think that what you don't like about him, it's a big deal. But right now they haven't found anything that is a big deal about Mark Carney. And to go back to the general question of this election, for me, I think I completely switched to, I think, Carney's favorite when we started getting those, I think it was 2 weeks ago, like those questions about, who do you think Pierre Poilievre would have voted for in the US election? Or this type of questions. And every time we get those questions about the US or Trump, the results are horrible for Pierre Poilievre. He gets like 2/3 of people think he would do what Trump asked him to do, or 75% thought he would have voted for Pierre Poilievre. And those are ultimately the ballot box questions. And it's I don't think Poilievre has enough time to completely change his image in 3 or 4 weeks about this. And that's unfortunate for him, because I think it's unfair, really, on many levels, but it is what it is, right? It's politics.
Why do you think he doesn't just say he would have? Well, I mean, I guess. Well, okay. Let me ask it to you this way: who do you think he would have voted for if he was an American citizen?
Honestly, at first, knowing what I know from the conservative circles, and when I go to events, I feel there is a good. I'm 50-50 on whether he would have voted Harris or Trump. I'm not sure. I can completely. I would not be confident in saying he would not have voted for Trump. That's there is a. If not, I'm not saying he likes all of his policies and his style and everything, because I don't think he does. But at the end of the day, there is, what I've noticed, people who are in politics for a long time, it really becomes like a tribal thing where, you vote for your side no matter what. And, for instance, Jenny Byrne is very much somebody like this, right? And that's his campaign manager. So I'm guessing there is a high likelihood he would have voted for Trump simply because he wants to vote conservative or for the right, So but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I missed an interview where he said otherwise, but I'm not right now. I wouldn't be confident in saying he would have voted for Harris.
Yeah, because that's the thing. I certainly know people in his orbit. I went to university with one of his senior aides, and like that guy was never Trump conservative to a T. But I don't know. My personal view of Polyev is that he is like a spoil the ballot. I vote for my wife, like Mitt Romney type. If he were an American voter, because I mean the thing about Polyev, and this is one of the things I'm very glad the liberals seem to have ditched in the Carney era, is I think Pierre Polyev will be bad. Spoiler alert: I'm not a conservative. I don't tend to believe conservative values are a good way of running a government. He won't be. He's not like a threat to democracy. He's not like the end of the world. If he wins, we'll beat him. Like, we'll beat him eventually. We'll fix the shit he breaks. Whatever, it's fine. But like this, Pierre Polyev is a pro-gay marriage, anti-conversion therapy, pro-choice conservative. Like, if we act like he is the same thing as Donald Trump, it is like unfair to reality and facts.
Yeah, no, it's the typical, it's very annoying, right? I mean, when everybody who's not as left as you are is just Donald Trump, right? And objectively is not, but you do have people out there who really believe that this is how it works, right? And obviously it doesn't help him right now that, you have people like Daniel Smith who really do really stupid things out there. And so it just creates this association, right? You're guilty by association just because you give the vibe that you all MAGA in Canada, even though you're not.
Yeah, no. What do you make of the Quebec polling? Leger had a 16-point lead. Palace just had a 10. Liaison, I think, has an 8. One of the good things about building a polling average is I have a spreadsheet with all of the polls. Even Abacus, 9-point lead for the Liberals over the Bloc. What do you make of it? Do you think it's sustainable? Are you surprised that Mark Carney doesn't get more gruff in Quebec and in the Quebec media for his French? And I think I have 43 Liberals in Quebec right now, 22 Bloc. Does that seem excessively high? What do you make of the sort of Bloc's inability to make a coherent case? Take Quebec wherever you want to go.
Yeah, I feel for Quebec, really, we know how they work. We're going to have a much better, picture of the situation after the French debate, right? I mean, Quebecers don't seem to pay attention a lot at the beginning, right? Even Andrew Scheer was, I think, polling pretty decently until the French debate, and his French was terrible and his positions were definitely not friendly to Quebec. So I think right now it kind of makes sense that the Bloc would have fallen a little bit because the news cycle and everything and the general vibes. I think at the end of the day, they do have a built-in advantage, and it will really come down to can if François Blanchet recenter the question of Trump and the threats and 51st state as to help Quebec nationalism. And I could see this path happening. It's not like just because Trump is threatening Canada that a lot of Quebecers will start loving Canada that much. So I would say, my opinion is pretty boring on this. I think the current polling is most likely right. And if the election was tomorrow, the Liberals would be winning quite a lot of seats in Quebec. It could change very quickly. If it changes, though, I don't think it's going to be because of his French. Again, this is something that people obsess about, and they're like, as soon as people hear how he speaks French, he's gonna drop. And objectively, his French isn't great. Especially, he's quite slow and boring and he makes mistakes. He also has a pretty terrible enunciations. Like, he's one of the few people who, when I watch or listen to him in French, there are times where I don't know what he said. Like, as a genuine, I'm like, what did he say there? What was the word? And so that's problematic. And so he's not going to gain any voters with his French. But one of my friends said that ultimately Carney sounds like an English speaker who is trying. That's how they sound when they try to speak French. And for most Quebecers, that's good enough. You don't need to, they don't expect you to be fluent. They just expect you to make the effort. And he does well enough there. So if he drops, it's not going to be because of the French. It's going to be because of other issues, in particular, the fact that ultimately Trump will revive Quebec nationalism versus Canadian nationalism.
Yeah, I mostly agree with that. I think the tell for me is that, Chantal Hubert never really said anything. I watched a little bit of the TVA coverage of, I don't remember what moment it was in the campaign. Might have been the night. Oh, it was the night he launched. Didn't see them or Radio Canada sort of making a big deal of it. And that I think would be sort of the cue. I mean, it is a little. Well, it's more than a little. It's pretty offensive when, let's be very real about this, English Canadians pretend that Quebecers don't actually pay attention to the words or the ideas that come out of somebody's mouth. They only judge it solely on the personality contest of like, how good is somebody's French? Like, that's a little offensive to Quebecers to be like, oh, they're such, stupid people that they can only pay attention to how good the delivery is. Carney's French is obviously not great. I will say, I think he's going to be, I don't know if the French debate or debates, because they tend to get to, it's so fucking stupid that we let this country have 3 debates, 2 of them in a language that like a quarter of the country speaks. It's so fucking stupid that we'd let this happen. But I think I almost wonder if Carney is going to be advantaged in the French debates because everyone is going to expect him to get steamrolled. And if he's just like a baseline of like, if he's just like fine and everyone's expecting train wreck, I almost think conservatives are sort of repeating the 2015 Trudeau trick of like, oh, the debate's going to be a disaster for him. Oh, he's not ready. And then it's going to be, I don't know, it's actually fine. It's like, okay. They're setting the bar too low for Carney. Am I crazy?
No, actually, I haven't thought of this, but I think you're absolutely right. And, on Twitter, for instance, I was maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, I had so many replies of people who were like, oh, I don't believe the polls because those polls were done before the leadership debates. And so they're not valid anymore. And I was like, what do you think happened at those debates? Like, genuinely, Carney didn't win those, but he didn't, especially the French one. But there was nothing that really happened that was so bad that he would really lose a lot of voters. And so, yeah, there might be. I also think conservatives are overhyping Poilievre or the debate. They really think that he's gonna go and mop the floor. And I'm not convinced. That, especially in French, that is gonna be the case. Poilievre's French is pretty good, but his French is still a lot worse than his English, and so he's not that great. At the very least, when he did the French debate in 2022, he didn't do that well. So if they're hoping that this is what will help him a lot, I would think again about this.
Yeah, Poilievre is the interesting thing about Poilievre is he didn't get tested really at all in that leadership race, right? Like, it was not a coherent leadership race in basically any way, shape, or form. And, Charest was just so bad and out of it that he wasn't able to sort of provide Poilievre much of a trial run. Now, of course, he's had the commons and everything in the, 2.5 years since he became leader, but like, he wasn't particularly great in either. Now, in fairness, the English debate in that campaign was like really stupid. Was that the debate where there was the auctioneer sort of like paddle system going on or something?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
The only thing I remember from that debate is Poilievre kind of sort of implied he wanted to abolish the Indian Act, and no reporter in this country has followed up with him in the 2.5 years since that he kind of sort of implied that he thinks the Indian Act is should be abolished. And I'm like, I remember watching it and I remember thinking, am I the only person who understood what he meant there? And no one has followed up, and he hasn't felt the need to follow up. So I think that's not what he meant, but it was just so funny watching Poilievre. Oh, sorry, there were 2 moments in that debate. One, the Indian Act thing, and 2, him saying, staring down the barrel of a camera, I'm pro-choice. The fact that the conservative pro-life movement did not have a meltdown when he says that in a TV debate is one of the more interesting, I think, things about the conservative movement in Canada these days. Why do you think that is? Why do you think a conservative Poilievre was allowed to just literally stare down the barrel of a camera and say, I am pro-choice? And, Campaign Life Coalition and none of these groups that hounded Aaron O'Toole for being insufficiently conservative. Why do you think they have just completely not cared that Poilievre is avowedly and extremely comfortable saying the words "I am pro-choice" on a debate stage?
I feel it must have to do with the fact that even during the election, the leadership election, his lead was so big and he won so large that especially the pro-life group, they had to read the room and realize that we're not that big of a group in this party. At least not when Poilievre is signing 300,000 members. We're big and we have an influence when it's a small election like in 2020, and we represent a significant share of the voters, but not anymore. And so I guess, they probably didn't like this. They just had to accept that they were not even a majority in this movement. That doesn't mean giving up, right? That's not a movement that is giving up. They continue their advocacy. And they had a few wins, I think, over maybe not on the pro-choice thing, on the abortion thing, but if we look on social issues, 2022 Poilievre would not talk about bathrooms and transgenders, but 2023 or 2024 Poilievre was doing so. So they might have, been able to convince him to be slightly more socially conservative on some issues, but obviously not on abortion itself.
Yeah, I also think the sort of political winds have changed on a lot of, trans rights issues, especially. Certainly the political winds have changed on immigration in the last 3 years, which is a different social issue, but, it is just wild to think of 2020, not even just 2022 Pierre Poilievre, 2022 me being in the immigration position that I currently occupy, which is honestly, probably shouldn't say this aloud. Yeah, the idea that Carney is getting advice from a Century Initiative advisor is not great, guys. I don't think it necessarily means that he supports the Century Initiative. I understand that people can have opinions on one area that is not your sort of advisory remit, yada yada. Let's calm down with the Century Initiative, guys. Let's make sure that we can get to 50 million people in a way that doesn't completely fuck our housing market before we start talking about 100 million. Yeah. But also, how the fuck am I the anti-immigration guy? What the fuck has happened in the last 5 years that I have completely turned from an open borders fucking, pussy ass, bleeding heart liberal to this? Well, I mean, I know what's happened, but Jesus Christ, it has. Why do you think it took Poilievre so long to get to an anti-immigration stance? I am surprised that he didn't really outflank the government on that one.
Oh, yeah. And I was getting so frustrated with him, maybe a year or 18 months ago, where I was like, what is he doing? I was, there were people already switching, and we could feel the liberals were about to maybe recognize their mistakes. And Poilievre was still doing videos with Indian students and telling them, don't worry, we're gonna have more of you and we're gonna make sure that you can stay here and whatnot. And I was like, why are you trying so hard? Obviously I know why. You really want to win the South Asian vote and win those seats. So I think that's the two reasons. The first one is really he wants those seats, and for better or worse, a lot of white people really misunderstand the minorities. And I would include myself there, but I think I'm slightly less delusional, where, you have a bunch of white people who think that all minorities want, if you're Chinese, you just want to import more Chinese people. If you're Indian, you just want more Indian people. And I'm like, that's not true. If you go talk to them, I mean, some of the people who hated the increase in Indian students colleges and whatnot would be the Indian people already here. So that it's, that's not how it works. So, but I think, it took them some time to realize that they could even go there without really risking of losing all their support in this community. The second reason is really just it's a trauma from 2015, right? I mean, for the conservative, they really still disbelieve that they cannot talk about anything about immigrations or minorities without being labeled as racist and risking losing everything. And so I think slowly but surely, they might have realized that they could actually switch on this issue. And it was actually a winning issue with the people they're trying to win. But you see it in DC, right? I mean, for instance, John Rustad, one thing he never went to is really talking about immigration. He didn't do it, even though the political climate was pretty good for this back last October. Like you had mayors in the Lower Mainland who, like NDP mayors, who would openly say, in the media, we are getting too many people. We just cannot. It's not working. We cannot get 20,000 people in my city every year. We cannot build the sewers, the building, and everything. And John Rustad was very, very careful not to go there. So I think it's very difficult for conservatives to go there. I feel pretty vindicated with, I think 18 months ago, I predicted that the Liberals would pivot on immigration before the conservative would. And I think I was proven right there. And I'm not too surprised. I think it's just the reality of the Liberals can afford to do it. The conservative cannot.
Yeah, only Nixon can go to China. Only the Liberals can cut immigration. Okay, so one of the sort of, I don't say talking points, but I can't think of a better word. One of the sort of big discussion points of the last sort of 6 weeks is what took certain pollsters longer than others to see the big swings to the Liberals, right? Obviously, Frank Graves was first, but Abacus was certainly a sort of laggard in this front. We haven't necessarily had Innovative the entire time, but Innovative Research, even up till like last week, still had conservative leads. One of the points that you have made is that Innovative and Abacus are the only two pollsters that are polling by past weight or by past vote.
Yeah.
I'm not positive that's the answer. It's the closest thing to a plausible answer as to why those two pollsters were two of the slower ones to get there. Because we've run through all the possible theories, right? Well, it was just the IVR pollsters. Yeah. Well, that it really wasn't. That it was, it was pollsters who have a certain partisan affiliation, and then, Ipsos kind of blew that one up by being the first pollster by like half an hour, but by being the first pollster to show a conservative lead. Obviously, Daryl Bricker, no fan of liberals or liberalism, right? And so, I think it kind of has to be the past vote. I don't know why that would be necessarily, but if you have any theories as to why that sort of methodological decision, which I would just like to make clear before you talk, was made blind, right? It's not like David Coletto and Greg Lyle were like, no, we need to show better conservative results in case the liberals surge. Like, they made this choice before any of this was known. This is just a way that they do their polling. Do you have a reason for why waiting by past vote would sort of delay seeing the Carney search?
No, and we had this debate in the US, right, where by the election, we know that some pollsters were weighing by past vote, and that was helping Trump, and ultimately they were proven right. But what voting by past vote does is it's supposed to make the results more similar to the last election, because you're assuming that the voters are the same as election. And so, that would be, in this case, we would expect Abacus to actually be the opposite. They would be the one showing the smallest conservative lead, not the biggest. So it's kind of counterintuitive to me that they were the one with the largest lead for Poilievre. That was really a monumental change from 2021, and the one that wouldn't, change back when Carney started rising. So the only theory I have is maybe voting by past vote just makes it that your adjustments will be slower because you were by one more thing that will anchor it to last election. But I cannot have a good theory. I think we should try to ask David Coletto, if he could just try to reweigh one of his polls, without using past votes? And does he get different results? And that would be interesting to see. I'm really interested with Abacus because innovative. I love Craig Lights. I like what they do. The data you get in the PDF of innovative. But in terms of horse race numbers, innovative isn't my go-to pollster. I think they're usually a little bit more off than the average. So, but Abacus isn't. So the fact that Abacus still has the conservative up by 3, and until like 2 weeks ago, they still had them like a really up by a lot more, is bugging me. And it's the one outlier that I really would like to be able to explain to see why they're there. But no, and that's why I wanted to talk about this with you today. Yeah, do you have a theory as to why that would be this? Because for me, everything I know about weighting by past vote should give us the opposite of what we've seen.
Yes, and okay. So the problem is that because yes, weighting by past vote should mean that you keep a certain amount of liberals in your sample, even as the liberals were collapsing, right? Because you're not, because the reason you weigh by past vote is you make sure that you still have the right proportion of people who voted liberal last time, and therefore what you don't end up with is a sample that would have voted 40% conservative, 25% liberal, which is why you're getting a 40 to 20 sort of result in the popular vote. So Coletto was one of the first pollsters to see the collapse. I think he might have actually straight up been the first pollster to see the collapse in 2023.
Yes.
He was the last pollster to see it back. I mean, I guess it's true in the sense that he wouldn't have picked up sort of false enthusiasm, not false enthusiasm, but sort of like, purely enthusiasm-based metrics would have applied. But even then, Leger moved before him. Ipsos moved before him.
Yeah.
Both from a very big lead to a merely big lead, and then to our current position. I don't have a great theory on what it is. The fact that it's Abacus is also like slightly terrifying me, just because I'm just being real about this. Like, I have held the position that Abacus are our second best pollster for like 3 years now.
Yeah.
And if the fact that our second best pollster has these results isn't terrifying me, then I'm like a massive hypocrite. And I mean, Coletto, look, obviously Coletto's been a guest on the pod 2 times. He's given me data a couple times. Like, I am a fan of his work personally, but like the conspiracy theories about him, I would just like take a second. The conspiracy theories about him, I think, are my favorite polling related conspiracies, because it's like, yes, David Coletto, a man who has twice come on my podcast and twice given me free proprietary Abacus data for columns, is a like secret fascist trying to overthrow democracy in Canada. Sure, definitely. Because if he definitely had those views that my Twitter mentions are ascribing to him, he definitely would be a fan of my shit lib ass. For sure. That's a definitely coherent understanding of Coletto. Like, it's just wild to me, the conspiracies that people invent, but like, I don't know. The real answer might just be kind of like BC 2024, where Main Street just kind of consistently was lower on the NDP and higher on the Conservatives. That just might be the answer. And he might be right, he might be wrong. They might converge, and it ends up being sort of, kind of irrelevant. But the conspiracies is just like, also, it's a 3-point lead, right?
Yeah,
he's not 20 points off anymore, right? He's not. I mean, well, he's 20 points off Frank Graves, I guess. But let's be real. Both of us think Abacus is way closer to correct than Frank Graves, right?
Correct. Yes, especially the 50% one. Yes, no, I don't believe it. Yes.
I mean, he tweeted last night that his last 6-night roll was a 17-point liberal lead. Like, that's not happening. I love Frank. but like that, come on, lad, that's not happening. That's got to be a methods issue.
Yeah, no, and if you make me choose between the two, I will definitely choose Abacus. To go back, I mean, if it has to do with past vote, it has to do with most likely either new voters or the like what's the I'm looking for, like voters who are not reliable, right? I mean, low propensity voters, and so but there as well, intuitively, we always thought that the conservatives were rising partially because they were converting or they were getting new voters. So again, weighing by past vote should have made the conservative lead smaller than other pollsters. So it's very counterintuitive. I maintain that we need to ask, David, I know David, let's ask him to try to reweigh his poll. And I think it's going to be anticlimactic. Even if he does it, it's probably going to be not making a big difference out there. And I think the true answer is it's more like just a house effect, and those happen. But we could at least try just for fun to see if it makes a difference.
Yeah, no, that's because the other part of this, of course, is that if the Conservatives are really, in a relative sense, gaining with younger voters more than they're gaining with older voters, that also doesn't really suggest that weighing by past vote would really help that.
Yeah.
Because as we well know, Gen Z doesn't actually turn out to vote.
No, especially not in Canada, no.
For sure. Are there any other sort of election-related topics that you want to get to?
No, I mean, I was almost joking. We could talk about the Green, but they're completely useless. So let's not waste our time.
Do you think Liz May keeps Saanich?
I don't know. I think there's no momentum for. If she does, it's gonna be thanks to some vote splitting, ironically, and like Conservative doing better on the island, especially where she is. But nobody cares. Like absolutely nobody cares. The people and the media, they really don't care about the NDP. So the Green really, really, they don't care. With that being said, Green might just be. We saw it at the BC election. Nobody cared about the Green, and they still won their usual seats. So I mean, I think it's very well established that the island is very green. So they might just be voting for her just because. It might help if Carney keeps having a very big lead, so that there is no fear of splitting the vote. But nobody cares beyond this.
Oh no, I do have one thing actually. I'm going to get you on the record with a hot take. I'm going to do this with everybody who comes on the show. This sort of just get like one hot take for the election, but so you can think about that while we talk about this. Max Bernier should be in the debates as a simple matter of democratic principle. He should be in the debate. The rules for the last two election campaigns were have won a seat at a previous election, have won a by-election seat during that parliament, or 3 got 4% or more at the previous election. Or there was vaguely a polling thresholds thing too, I think. But Max Bernier got 4% of the vote at the last election. The PPC got over 4% of the vote at the last election. That was the rule for 2021 debate inclusion, and they decided to strip the 4% at the previous election rule because Max Bernier got 4%.
Yes.
This seems like a really anti-democratic decision to rig this against the PPC. Now, if you would like to say, but the PPC aren't polling at 4% anymore, well, the PPC were polling in a position where they probably should have been on the debate stage last time. So yes. That doesn't really seem congruent. But more importantly, we can't be chopping and changing the rules, because if we did this to the Greens, right, I just don't. It's undemocratic. I am aware that people are going to say, you only want Max Bernier on the debate stage because that'll split the vote. I don't think it would split the goddamn vote. I think Bernier on a debate stage would end the PPC because he would just say such batshit nonsense. And frankly, his English isn't like great. It would be a disaster for it. It would be a disaster, and I don't think it would hurt Poilievre. I think it would probably help Poilievre by allowing him to triangulate off of Bernier and say, hey, I'm not as crazy as that guy. But as a pure matter of democratic, small d democratic principles, Max Bernier should be on the fucking debate stage.
Oh yeah, no, I was super upset. Like, was it 2 months ago when the commission changed the rules? I still haven't seen any convincing argument as to why the eligibility rules should be changed from 2021. I mean, and I'm really hoping that whatever rules we have now, we just stick to them for like many elections. I mean, ultimately you have to make a choice. I get this, but it makes no sense. And it really look in this case, I'm still not over the fact that the commission went there, because even if they thought genuinely, okay, you know, the rules we had, they were not good enough, one of the criteria should be changed. Even if you genuinely believe this, the fact that this time changing the rules really made it look like you were going after one party in particular, really looked bad. And I was like, you should maybe wait at least until next election until you change those rules. But you know, the PPC and the debates, the rules have been stupid for like 6 years now. They got invited in 2019 when I don't think they should have been invited. They got invited based on like really stupid polling, right? I think they did some writing polls from ECOS, and essentially the question was like, would you consider voting PPC? And they were like, oh, see, 25% of people said they would consider, so they could win a seat, so we should invite them. So they get invited in 2019 when they shouldn't have. They don't get invited in 2021 when they really should have. That was, you know, they rose and that was their election. And this time they should be invited again and they're not. So it's all stupid. And I'm quite sad, you know, I'm quite happy you're saying this, the fact that it's not democratic, because when this happened, and you know, I went to bat for Maxime Bernier and the PPC, like when that happens, and you have no idea how most people on the right were like, no, Bernier should not be at the debate because he doesn't represent anybody. And I was like, can you stop being partisan for 1 second? Can you just think about democracy and how it looks? I mean, it's not a question about having the guy you like or not. You can hate Maxime Bernier and you can think he's irrelevant, but the rules are the rules and you should care about the rules.
There's a decent chance actually that the Greens fall out of Parliament. It's, you know, call it in the next 3 elections, right? Just because, you know, Liz May is presumably going to retire at some point soon, so that seat's gonna not be that, you know, once she leaves, Sandage is probably gonna go to voting for either the Liberals or the NDP, depending on which Progressive Party is leading at the time. And then, you know, Kitchener seems like it's safe as long as, you know, Mike is there, but if he leaves, it certainly becomes competitive again. And I wouldn't want the Greens excluded. And if I wouldn't want the Greens excluded, if they were to fall out of Parliament, I mean, Bernier got more votes than the Greens in the last election.
Yeah, quite a lot more. Yeah.
That is an objective fact. And the Greens are going to be on the debate stage repeating the same nonsense as always, and the PPC isn't. Like, that's not a defensible choice based on actual election performance. No, and I think you mentioned before that it's so stupid that we get more debates in French than in English. I'm wondering if all of this could also be solved by, you know, some people don't want to have 6-7 people on the stage because you just want to hear from the main two. So maybe we should start implementing like a tradition that we get an actual, you know, face-to-face in English between, in this case, Carney versus Poilievre. And then we do the official debate as well with like, you know, 5, 6, 7 people. And this one will be more chaotic, but you hear from everybody. But then you still get your one-on-one, the one you care about, because I understand this opinion. And if we have this, then maybe, you know, things would be better. But I'm not super sympathetic to the idea, a debate, you know, it sucks if you have too many people. I've watched French presidential debates where you had like 8, 9, 10 people, and those debates were very good. To be fair, they were 3 hours long, so maybe the average Canadian doesn't want the debate to last that long. But it's possible to have debates with a lot of people representing very different opinion, and they're still very good debates. I mean, the dirty little secret of debates is if you have a good moderator who asks good questions, the debate's probably going to be good. And if you have a bad moderator who asks bad questions, your debate's probably going to suck. And it's going to suck whether you have 2 people, 3 people, 5 people, or 7 people on stage. or it's going to be great no matter who you have if you have somebody asking the right questions.
Yes.
What is your hot take of the election? Your bold prediction? Your, you want credit if it ends up coming true take of the campaign?
I will go at, it's not a full prediction, but I will say right now, I think people are underestimating the possibilities that Poilievre wins fewer seats than Erin O'Toole. I think right now it's not impossible. I don't think I don't think I would bet money on it right now, but I really think people are sleeping on this. People are looking at the polls and they're only looking at like, oh, what if we gain, well, we being the conservative, we gain 5 points and we win at least a minority. I'm like, yeah, but you could lose 2 and win fewer seats. And right now you're closer to this than to winning government.
Yeah, I mean, I've got them at 127, I believe, when I updated for liaison and palace. Like, because the thing is, the conservative vote share can go up. If the liberal vote share goes up more, that is still a swing to the liberals. And that's a good one. I think I'm gonna end up writing this in a column. I think the take that I'm gonna one of the takes I'm definitely gonna write up for the site soon is gonna be, I'm not positive the Conservative Party of Canada exists at the next election.
Yeah, I thought about this.
The point of the Conservative Party of Canada is to win elections. And if it doesn't win elections, then I don't know how long you can keep the party together, especially if the sort of prevailing narrative out of the election is Mark Carney won by running essentially as a progressive conservative, which I don't necessarily think is fair, but certainly that is what a band of opinion is trying to suggest is why it's happening. And if that does happen, I mean, I guess the only reason it wouldn't happen, who the fuck would lead the new sort of moderate PC faction of the party? Like, that wing of the party has not produced anyone of sort of caliber or talent since the merger.
Yeah, no. And the talent, the Joshua, Peter MacKay, and others, they're just not there anymore. So I guess Peter MacKay, if he wants to come back, I think he might do it. But
he's a nobody. Like he was a mediocre cabinet minister at the time. He was certainly scandal plagued at the time, and it's like he's been out of office for a decade. He's not running in this election. Like, at some point, if Peter MacKay really wants to come back, he needs to piss or get off the pot. But the fact that I guess Patrick Brown, maybe, if he wants to. If we just want to throw all ethics rules out the window, I guess Patrick Brown can come and lead the new party.
Yeah, to be fair, I know who would lead this if they want to go to a PC. Doug Ford, right? So if your hot take is that Poilievre is not leading like a united conservative next election, I think a lot of it depends as if does Doug Ford want the job, assuming Poilievre doesn't win this time.
Yeah. No, it's gonna be really fun. Look, I'm not sure. Like, I'm a partisan liberal hack, so that's sort of in here. I think we can both agree the funniest outcome of the election is conservative or liberal majority. Not for policy reasons, not for ideas reasons, for the utter meltdown of conservatives reason. That will be the funniest outcome, is if Mark Carney wins, and also the victory lap that I and my friends will be able to take on TrueAnon will be iconic, I think.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I was gonna say the funniest would be another liberal minority. Like, imagine that we do all of this, we change leader and whatnot, and we get essentially the same result the third time in a row. That would also be pretty funny, I guess, but it's less likely to happen with the NDP collapsing.
That would be fun. Sort of like the Liberals lose like 10 seats to the Conservatives, gain 5 off the block, 5 off the NDP. They're stuck in the low 160s again. Cons are up to like 130. That would be pretty fun. Who do you think?
If
Who do
you're
you
looking
think the
for
bloc would
open, yeah.
back in the minority parliament?
Sorry, say that again.
Who do you think the bloc would back in a minority parliament? I'm
Oh,
writing a column about this for
yeah.
later today.
Oh, I'm glad you asked because that's exactly what I wanted to talk. My actual theory is that the bloc, at least in the short term, will back whoever tries. So that means that, for instance, if the election is close and let's say Poilievre has a few more seats than Carney, but it's a minority, I think Carney would try to govern. And I could see the bloc just allowing him to do. But at the same time, if Poilievre has a minority and he tries first, essentially, I think the bloc just goes for no election right away. So that's who they back. I think if we have to go with policies, I think they're more likely to want to have Carney than Poilievre. I mean, we know on a personal level that Blanchet really doesn't like Poilievre, but if he votes for the interest of Quebec, maybe he swallow his pride and just, allow Poilievre to govern for 18 months. But I really think they would just avoid an election. So they will go for whoever tries first. As long as they don't do crazy stuff, right? If it's Poilievre, he doesn't try to build like 6 pipelines in Montreal or something like this. And if it's Carney, he doesn't try to go walk over Quebec and their rights on religion and whatnot. So as long as they don't do crazy stuff that would alienate Quebec, they both get a shot for at least 12 months.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I'm sort of keep prickling in my mind is a lot of Quebec separatists believe that a conservative government makes it likelier for them to win a referendum.
Yeah.
The PQ obviously are promising a referendum in the first term.
Yes.
Of if they win, it looks like it looks fairly likely that there's going to be a pro-independence majority in the next assembly, whether or not that's a PQ majority or a PQ plus Quebec Solidaire sort of comfortable, majority between them. That's the only thing pricking in my brain. Obviously, a Poilievre government that's sort of neutered by the bloc would be fairly useless at getting energy projects through. So that would be something. I don't know. I think the NDP's collapse really does put the bloc in the driver's seat in a way that they weren't in the last 2 minority parliaments. And I think if that's where we end up, which it's not where the polls are right now, but it's where I think both of us think it's plausible for it to end up. That's something that I just feel like people have not really talked about enough or focused on enough, because we still have this idea of sort of Gilles Ducep's bloc as a sort of, stridently as much of an anti-conservative party as it is a sort of nationalist, independentist party. Bryan Breguet, thanks for doing this, buddy.
Always a pleasure. I'm glad we're getting an actual election, honestly, because I was dreading this election. I was happy Poilievre was ahead, but I thought it would be a very boring election, to the point where I was like, do I even want to build a model or anything? But now it's fun. So at least we for political nerds like you and me, this is fun.
Yeah, it's funny. There's a part of me, as a content producer, there's a part of me that hopes at least one of these pollsters has like Poilievre momentum at some point. Because that will be a lot more fun from a content standpoint than all the pollsters sort of marching in unity to some sort of because there's only so many columns that are going to be able to get can Carney actually win a majority? Oh, it's going to run through these 12 seats. I'm not going to be able to do that gimmick for 5 weeks. At prominent_Bryan on Twitter, too close to call.com, .ca?
.ca. The .com was taken already.
.ca for the model and the simulator. The simulator is quite fun.
I need to update it, by the way. Good reminder, yes.
Yeah, no. Scrimshaw.scripted.substack.com for all of my political writing. Follow me on Twitter at Scrimshaw. Same on Blue Sky. Scrimshaw Show on Twitter. Scrimshaw _show on Twitter. Buy my book, Salvation of the Storm. I used to have this intro down, and then the lines thing stopped happening, so I have no idea. Oh, very, very last non-politics question. How excited were you that the Canadian MNT beat the Americans last night?
I actually didn't watch, but I was pretty happy. Obviously, it didn't mean as much as when we beat them at the Four Nation tournament. But, we're at the point where every time we beat them, it's just fun.
Yeah, it's very fun. My worst soccer opinion is England is finally going to win the World Cup. And it has nothing to do with England bias. It has nothing to do with my opinions on that team. It is solely to do with the fact that they hired Thomas Tuchel. And if that man could drag that piece of shit 2021 Chelsea side to a Champions League,
and
he could get to a World Cup.
Yeah, no, I could see him being a better coach than Southgate, even though Southgate did pretty well. But I do think, Tuchel most likely win the Euro 2020 versus Southgate. So.
Yeah. Oh God, no. If any manager would have won, any manager wins the Euro 2020. That's not Southgate. I can't do this. We have talked for too long, and I could do 20 minutes on why Southgate needs to be fucking burned in effigy. Thanks for doing this, buddy.
Okay, thank you. Take care. Bye.
Yes, I'm gonna stop recording.